It's the early morning of April 15th, 2014, off the rugged coast of South Korea. A ferry barely 2.7 kilometers north of Byongpung-do sends out a desperate distress call at 08:55. This is the MV Sewol, a 6,825-ton vessel carrying 476 souls, teetering on the edge of calamity. In that heartbeat of terror, as the ship begins to lean perilously and the grim reality of impending doom sets in, you feel the crushing weight of fate. In just a few short hours, the Sewol would capsize, swallowing 304 lives and leaving a scar on a nation that still weeps. I am NJ from Freak Files. Stay with me, because every word here is a testament to fatal decisions born of greed and negligence, a cascade of choices that turned an ordinary journey into an unthinkable nightmare. Before the Sewol became a byword for national tragedy and outrage, it was simply another ferry navigating the dark, choppy waters between Incheon and Jeju. Imagine, if you will, a bustling port at dawn, passengers hurrying to their gates, crew members double-checking supplies, and a thick fog rolling in as if to conceal the day's hidden dangers. Underneath this veneer of routine, however, a lethal flaw was festering. The command to stay in your quarters, meant to maintain order, would ultimately transform into a death sentence for many aboard. In those final, unsuspecting moments, no one could have imagined that every seemingly mundane decision was steering the ship toward irreversible disaster. Our story begins not in present-day South Korea, but in Japan, during the early 1990s. In 1994, a vessel was built by Hayashi Kane Shipbuilding and Engineering Co. Ltd. in Nagasaki, a ship originally named Ferry Namanu. Designed to serve both cargo and passengers under the A-Line Ferry Company, she measured 145.61 meters in length and carried a gross tonnage of roughly 6,600 tons. With a capacity for around 850 souls, including vehicles, the design had one fatal compromise. To maximize revenue, passenger accommodations were stacked high above the cargo decks, which in turn raised the ship's center of gravity. For years, this design flaw was tolerated as the vessel sailed smoothly, but like a ticking time bomb hidden in plain sight, it would eventually prove catastrophic. Fast forward to 2012. The aging ferry Namanui was sold to Chonghaejin Marine Company for $11.6 billion and rechristened as the Sewol. Promised a new lease on life, the vessel underwent extensive refurbishment, a process that would later be scrutinized for its fatal flaws. I want you to understand this clearly. Driven by an insatiable hunger for profit, the new owners modified the ship far beyond its safe design. Extra passenger cabins were added to the third, fourth, and fifth decks, adding an additional 239 tons to the vessel's already precarious balance. Even though the Korean Register of Shipping imposed stricter cargo limits, reducing maximum cargo from 1,450 tons to 987 tons, and demanded increased ballast from 1,333 tons to 1,703 tons, the operators blatantly defied these rules. Barely after certification, an extra 37 tons were tacked on to spruce up the bridge gallery, an addition that pushed the Sewol further into the realm of instability. This was not a minor oversight, but a calculated risk that would come at an unbearably high cost. On March 15, 2013, the refurbished Sewol finally returned to service. For nearly a year, she plied the route between Incheon and Jeju without incident, until that fateful morning of April 15, 2014. I speak directly to you now. Imagine being on board a vessel overloaded with 2,142.7 tons of cargo, 185 cars, trucks, and countless other goods, along with 443 passengers. Among these were 325 students on a school trip from Danwon High School, their hearts full of hope and excitement. Yet the combination of excessive weight, an elevated center of gravity, and improperly secured cargo created a perilous cocktail. As thick fog descended upon the port, delays ensued. At last, on the previous night at 21, the Sewol departed into the inky darkness, unaware that this routine journey was about to be transformed into a calamitous voyage of despair. In the early hours of April 16th, the Sewol approached the notorious Mangol Channel, a narrow passage infamous for its rapid, unpredictable currents. Picture the vessel slicing through dark, turbulent waters at 20 knots, its course initially set at 137 degrees. On the bridge, tension was palpable. third mate Park Han-kyul and helmsman Cho Jun-ki, having started their shift at 7:30, were tasked with steering through these treacherous conditions. With each small course correction, from 137 to 140, then to 145 degrees, a creeping sense of dread began to settle in. I ask you, have you ever felt that chilling premonition when something just isn't right? That sense of impending doom, even before disaster fully reveals itself? That was the moment when the crew of the Sewol first sensed that fate was closing in. Around 8:48, the first unmistakable signs of disaster emerged. The Sewol began to list sharply to starboard, and the bow veered ominously to the right. In a desperate bid to counteract the tilt, third mate Park ordered a swift turn to port. Yet amidst the confusion on the bridge, conflicting testimonies later emerged. Was the order misinterpreted, or did the helmsman overcompensate? The only certainty was that the vessel's heading soon reached a dangerous 150 degrees. Unsecured cargo shifted violently across the deck, robbing the ship of the critical restorative force needed to remain upright. By 08:55, as a chilling distress call echoed over the radio, the stark truth became undeniable. The Sewol was irreversibly doomed. I want you to feel the terror of those final moments. Standing on a tilting deck, the ship groaning under the strain, while a haunting voice over the PA system repeatedly commands, "Stay put." That order, meant to maintain calm, became a cruel sentence, trapping countless souls inside. Amid the chaos, a brave young student, Choi Duk-ha, managed to dial 119, a desperate cry for help in a sea of confusion. Within minutes, patrol vessels and helicopters converged on the scene, yet the Sewol's descent continued unabated. Crew members, paralyzed by either confusion or a shocking neglect of duty, abandoned their posts. Even Captain Lee Jun-seok, a veteran of 40 years at sea, was seen fleeing instead of upholding his responsibility. As the vessel's tilt deepened to an appalling 60 degrees, panic gave way to a chilling silence, one punctuated by the sound of crashing water and the agonized cries of those trapped inside. At 9:30, an evacuation order was finally issued. Lifeboats were deployed, and desperate passengers clung to hope as they fought against time and a relentless pull toward the depths. But for many, every passing second sealed their fate. In that final harrowing hour, over 304 lives were extinguished, many of them young, full of promise, and forever lost to the merciless waves. In the wake of the sinking, South Korea was plunged into a collective state of shock and sorrow. The Sewol disaster not only claimed lives, but also ignited a firestorm of national outrage. Families wept as they grappled with the enormity of their loss, and a country demanded accountability. As rescue operations continued deep into the day, with helicopters hovering and divers scouring the wreckage, a grim picture emerged. Investigations soon revealed that this catastrophe was not a freak accident. It was a predictable outcome of systemic failures. The ship was overloaded far beyond its safe limits. Cargo was haphazardly secured, and the ballast water, critical for maintaining balance, was woefully insufficient. Moreover, the extensive modifications made during the refurbishment, driven by corporate greed and a reckless disregard for safety, had pushed the Sewol into a state of chronic instability. Every technical oversight, every ignored regulation, had contributed to a domino effect that culminated in this unspeakable tragedy. Now let me add some crucial value for you, the viewer. Maritime safety experts and industrial engineers have examined the Sewol disaster in painstaking detail. Their analysis reveals that the tragedy was not confined to a single vessel, but was symptomatic of a broader, systemic collapse. When profit becomes the primary driver over safety, oversight is compromised at every level, from the design of the vessel to the enforcement of regulations. The Sewol case highlights how modifications that increase capacity and aesthetics can come at the cost of stability. It also exposes the dangerous reliance on the honor system within the shipping industry, where self-reporting and minimal inspections allow for unchecked risks. I urge you to reflect on this broader lesson. Every system we rely on, whether in transportation, healthcare, or technology, demands rigorous oversight and accountability. The Sewol disaster teaches us that neglect, be it through corporate greed or regulatory complacency, can have catastrophic consequences. It serves as a somber reminder that safety must always come before profit. In response to the tragedy, many experts now call for stricter international standards, more frequent and thorough inspections, and a culture of transparency that prioritizes human life above all. I want you to listen carefully to the voices of those who survived this nightmare and the families forever altered by it. Survivors of the Sewol recount a surreal blend of terror and disbelief, a moment when routine orders morphed into a death sentence. Families speak of a void that no amount of justice can fill, a wound that time may never heal. Their testimonies underscore that the Sewol was not merely a technical failure. It was a human catastrophe wrought by a failure to act when lives were at stake. Across South Korea, communities have organized vigils and erected memorials to honor those lost. These acts of remembrance are not only tributes to the victims, but also serve as ongoing calls for systemic change. Every candle lit, every shared story is a demand that such a disaster never be allowed to happen again. I speak to you now with a heavy heart. When greed eclipses safety, the cost is measured in irreplaceable human lives. In the immediate aftermath of the sinking, investigations swept through every level of responsibility. Captain Lee, along with key crew members, was arrested on charges ranging from negligence to manslaughter. Company executives, including Chonhaejeon Marine's top officials, faced criminal scrutiny for their roles in permitting unsafe conditions. This legal reckoning was a bitter, necessary reminder that accountability must prevail, even when it is painfully delayed. The fallout from the Sewol disaster forced a national dialogue about the values we place on human life versus profit. It challenged regulatory bodies, questioned the effectiveness of safety protocols, and left an indelible mark on the collective conscience of a nation. As reforms were slowly enacted and new safety measures implemented, the voices of the victims and survivors became the catalysts for change, a change that we must continue to demand in every facet of our modern society. I want you to carry this truth with you. The Sewol sinking is more than a historical event. It is a raw, painful lesson in the consequences of neglect and unchecked greed. Every life lost is a stark reminder that safety and accountability must never be compromised. As you go about your daily life, remember that the systems we rely on are only as strong as the vigilance we demand from those who oversee them. Let the legacy of the Sewol fuel a movement for perpetual vigilance and reform. Demand that every oversight is addressed, that every regulation is enforced, and that the memory of those lost is honored by ensuring such a tragedy is never repeated. The call for accountability is not merely about justice for the past. It is a commitment to safeguarding our future. I urge you to stand with those who seek change, to support policies that prioritize human life, and to never forget that in our world, every decision matters. Thank you for joining me on this unflinching journey through the MV Sewol sinking tragedy of 2014. Every detail we uncover, every lesson we learn, is a call to action, a call to honor the memory of the victims by ensuring that safety, accountability, and compassion always prevail over profit. I am NJ from Freak Files, channel that bring dark history and tragedies to life. Stay vigilant, demand change, and let the legacy of the Sewol serve as a constant reminder that no human life should ever be sacrificed in the name of greed.